How are the visual entities we create immediately enhanced by semiotic sign action? Do I mean the designs and illustrations we create? Yes, I do. And yes, there is more. In the marks, lines, shapes, colours, etc. you use to create your designs and illustrations. As designers and illustrators, at an immediate perception level of interpreting, the visual entities we create are meaning-bearing. Let us immediately explore this. Interpretation needs experience, existing situated cultural knowledge, and mediation in a form that is interpretable. Wait, is that not a circular thinking? Interpretation needs to be interpretable? Think about this quickly. What does your nation's flag look like? The colours, lines, shapes, etc. that form your nation's flag can be interpreted as signifying only your nation. Yes? How do you know that? You culturally learn it. The flag symbolises your relationship to your country's identity. The flag also symbolises other cultural interpretations, some personal and some collective. Which came first? Your identity built on your individual and collective experience of existing within your nation state, or the bit of colour cloth. We have already established that humans will interpret meaning in practically anything if they perceive the visual entity to be meaning-bearing. Hence, semiotic science. The Danish semiotician Thorkild Thelefsen attributes to Peirce's triadic structuring of semiosis a human level of existence. In seasons 1 and 2, we have focused on the iconic and lexical and symbolic representations of a concept to be visually communicated. Thelefsen argues that this level of semiotic representation corresponds to humankind. It is a very human level of semiotic communication. This is why in the last season I spent time on how to understand the designer or illustrator's target audience. The audience's lived experiences offer insights into how to craft your semiotic encoding of intended meaning to them. Now, as we turn our attention to interpretation, Thelefsen argues that this level of the effect of the semiotic representation of the sign on the interpreter, the target audience, corresponds to culture. Peirce states that nothing is a semiotic sign until it is interpreted as a sign. Until the visual entity or entities that have been designed or illustrated are perceived as something. At the perception level, we are within what Peirce calls the phenomenological level of firstness. We have already seen that this is the perceptible level that semiotic iconic representation operates at. A level of possibilities, resemblances, familiarity. A level of perception that hooks the interpreter to wonder, what does this mean to me? If the semiotic sign is not perceived as something more than its first appears, then it will not function as a semiotic sign. For this to happen, the visual entity, whatever it is, has to spring recognition in the target audience as something they already know. This is the immediate effect of interpretation. This immediate effect on the interpreter by placing a possible impression of meaning into their mind through how the intended concept is visually represented. Peirce refers to this as grammatical, but more on this later this season. The immediate effect on the interpretation puts a possibility in the interpreter's mind that this could be that. Once the interpreter, the target audience, begins to interpret a thing for something, then how this interpretation is visually mediated can dynamically take over. We will deal with dynamic state next week. At the immediate effect level, Peirce says this happens as a propositional function, as a semiotic trigger to propose this could be that. This immediate state is not tangible, but an essence of possible interpretation that needs further attention and mediated interpretation to the meaning of the sign. Within the immediate state, the target audience is on a cusp of perception. Either what they see has the meaning-bearing semiotic interpretable potential of being perceived, or it does not and is passed over. This is a phenomenological state of being that Peirce calls Firstness. We have understood that the iconic level of semiotic sign action of representing the intended concept is a potential aesthetic trigger to hook audience attention. This is due to the nature that firstness is a state of possibilities, resemblances, familiarities, potentialities, and proposals. The crafting of the visual meaning-bearing entity or entities by a designer or illustrator as iconic representations of familiar things in the form of lines, shapes, marks, colours, etc. is only a third of the sign action's power. The immediate state of the effect on interpreting informs semiotic encoding too. Before I explain how both the iconic and immediate levels power the sign action, I quickly need to provide you all with a bit more theoretical context. So bear with me as I begin to conclude this episode. In just the same way as the semiotic representational concept is tiered in 3 ascending levels of representative power, iconic, indexical, and symbolic, the effect of how an encoded semiotic sign has on the interpreter is also tiered in 3 levels of complexity as reams, dissents, and arguments. The final third of this sign action power is how the semiotic sign's articulation of the meaning bearing is represented as quasi-signs, synsigns, and legisigns. We will not cover these terms in detail until season 4, but they will be name-checked sporadically in later season 3 episodes. The immediate effect of the choice of how the iconic basic visual communication building blocks are composed creates a continuing semiosis between the concept, representation, and interpretation. Let me quickly explain this semiotic encoding power with a favourite Semiosis 101 visual example. A panda. Well, a drawing of a panda, or a drawing of a bear, or a drawing of an animal, or just a pattern of shapes, or just black blobs, or just black. In season 2, I used an example of a panda to illustrate how the iconic, indexical, and symbolic levels of representing a concept work. Check out season 2's second omnibus to catch up. This time, we will return to the panda drawing to consider the semiotic effect of interpreting the panda from the illustration. We will stay in a state of firstness. If you look at this drawing and you see a panda, well done, you win. If you looked at this drawing and saw a bear, well done, but not accurate enough. If you looked at this drawing and saw an animal, well done, no reward. If you only see shapes and patterns, well done. If you only see black blobs, yeah. If you only see black, yeah. None of these interpretations are incorrect, are they? All 6 of these interpretations are accurate and come from the same drawing. 6 interpretations that are correct. Yes, let me reorder them in a perceptual order. Black, blobs, shapes, patterns, animal, bear, panda. The first 4 of these are perceived in a state of firstness. We perceive black blobs forming shapes and those shapes forming a pattern. We see the black and the blobs, but do we interpret these as anything that is meaning bearing? When we perceive the black blobs as shapes, we begin, because we are hardwired to see if they form a pattern. Whether there is a meaning bearing intent in any of the patterns we see, we still need to interpret. There may not be. It could just be spilt black ink. I'm not testing to see if any of you are psychopaths, honest. But if we are looking at these shapes, a pattern is perceived, you cannot help interpreting what it could be. You're just being made aware of the immediate effect on how we semiotically interpret. As this is a drawing of a panda, we can see the illustrator has used the black shapes as iconic representations of key areas of a panda's body. In this panda example, we see how the immediate effect on interpretation is intrinsically linked with iconic representation. The patterns are iconic visual communication building blocks which hook attention to trigger interpretation. How far along the intended semiotic sign action path towards the concept of panda the interpreter can proceed is dictated by the interpreter's lived experience and learned cultural references. If the interpreter has never culturally seen a panda in their lived experience, they will never interpret that. At this stage, the interpreter has only got as far as perceiving a pattern. This pattern may be semiotically encoded as meaning-bearing. The immediate effect offers only a possibility of a semiotically encoded animal, bear, or even a panda. Come back next week when we move from the immediate effect on semiotic interpretation up to secondness and the dynamic state. Thanks for watching. Check out the other Semiosis 101 episodes, like and share them with your friends. And hit the bell and subscribe buttons to be notified when next week's free Semiosis 101 episode is published. You can also follow Semiosis 101 on the socials for updates. It is at Semiosis 101 on Instagram and Threads. See you all again next week for more Semiosis 101 to help illustrators and designers to enhance your visual communication skills.